Welcome to my basement, everybody. I have got a very fun guest for you guys today. Her name is Grace Randolph, and she is the host and creator of Beyond the Trailer. And she's had a very, very long and successful career in I was going to say video games, but we're talking movies today. In movie criticism.
Video games, though.
You do, okay.
Everything's blending together. Everything's blending together because I followed the comic book properties and the movie properties wherever they go. And Hollywood has finally discovered video games. Well, they're taking them seriously.
They're taking them seriously. They're a huge part of the business. Every, massive entertainment conglomerate like Sony and Warner Brothers, and Disney, they all have video game verticals and divisions. And as well as I do, all of these movie makers and television creators out there are also huge game fans. They're all playing video games, and sort of not writing and not working on their narrative properties. They're sort of skipping out and playing a lot of video games these days.
They're like, wait a minute, who has the rights to this?
That's right. Well, welcome to the show, Grace. I've been watching your stuff for a long time, and I think the thing that sparked my interest in having you on the show, and you're probably hearing this quite a bit these days, is you had a little cameo in the second Zombieland movie, and I'm like, I know that person. That's so cool. How did that come together? How did you end up in Zombieland too?
Oh, it was crazy. They had a fun idea where they wanted to use real people to interview Bill for this junket. And so Sony's publicity department emailed me and they were like, do you want to be in Zombieland too? They didn't tell me what it was going to be. And I was like, of course I do. And I was so scared, like it wasn't going to work out. Like I was just like on like this holding pattern for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then they were so nice. They gave us the full treatment. They flew all of us down to Atlanta. They put us up in the hotel because it was shot in a hotel. And then we got to be zombified. That was like the coolest experience, to have that makeup and everything and to go through that process. And then Bill, of course, is just so great to work with. One day he was like the first day we met him, and he was improvising and going through it and talking to us about what we thought would be some fun ideas. And he was just really, everything you would hope he would be.
That's amazing. Do you have an acting background? Was that how you sort of started your career path?
I started my career in comedy. I've done comedy, improv, and sketch, which helps me, I think, with some of my stuff,
For sure,
But I had my own comedy improv group. I used to flyer in Times Square, fill the room. And also, we were the only sketch show at the Comedy Cellar for about a year.
Right on.
So that was really great, and I loved doing that. And kind of like, at that time, somebody was like, someone needed someone to do some content, for a company that was like trying to sell a player, a video player at the time.
Sure, yeah.
And they were like, if you want to upload it on YouTube, fine. And it just started to do really well. And at that time, YouTube editorialized the front page. And I was very fortunate that the entertainment editors really liked what I was doing. And so they would put me on the front page a lot. And that's how I started to grow my channel.
That's amazing. And how much do you kind of credit that ability to improvise and kind of roll with it for your longevity and your ability to kind of, transition? We're going to talk a little bit about this crazy year, but you've been doing this for a while and you've had to pivot in a bunch of different ways. And how much do you credit that experience?
I started doing audience interviews. I would go to the theater and I'd interview people when they came out, which was a lot of fun. When I started, you didn't have to have a movie review out too early. Now review embargoes lift so early that you can't really do that. There are also some other problems that came up too, but I did that for a while and it was really, really fun. But I think that one of my favorite sayings is evolve or die.
Right.
And I think you have to do that in life in every way. So I'm improvising on camera, but also like off camera. I think it's always fun to have the unexpected and, to see what might come next and, constantly tweak things.
Yeah, totally. Did you grow up as a movie fanatic? Was that one of your big passions when you were a little girl? Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that my parents love movies. And so every weekend they would take my sister and I to the movies, and we would go and we would see 2 to 3 movies a weekend. And not only would they take us, but they would talk to us about what we were seeing. And so I like to say, and particularly my mom would tell me all the Hollywood background that she'd heard and read and everything that was going on, and she'd paint a real picture for me. Like they were very adamant in making sure that we knew that people were making these movies.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they weren't,
were they in the business? Were they in the business?
No, they're not. But they're just movie fans.
Cool.
My mother was really wonderful and was a full-time parent, but she's very smart. She's my role model, and I really like the way she does things. And so I kind of like to feel like I'm doing for everybody what she would do for me when I would go to the movies.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because it really improved my experience.
That's awesome. That also speaks to, I've been covering video games for 25 years, and I've always thought that movies have had this really interesting place in our culture where we do know about budgets and we do know about, box office on the weekends. And you've got a whole series with Movie Math talking about all that. And video games are still, inching towards that. We're still kind of understanding that there are people behind the scenes that build all of this stuff. And it is fascinating that movies mean a lot more than just plunking down your, I guess it's $15 now, to go and see something on screen.
25 here, Victor.
Oh yeah, New York inflation, right?
Yeah. It's really expensive.
Well, it's more than that though, because we're invested in the people on screen. Sometimes we know, who these writers are, and mostly it's the directors and the actors, but there is this kind of mass awareness of how the machine works and how the business works. And you get into it. And you get into it with your content.
Well, I think I try to. I think it's really important, especially not only because I think it's important to give those people their due for what they've done, but I also feel very strongly that people want to work in the entertainment business. Like everybody, a lot of people go and watch these movies and they say, I'd like to be a part of that. And for a very long time, the business, Hollywood just made it feel like, okay, you can be a writer, a director, a producer, an actor. That's it. Yeah. And I feel like there's so many other rewarding jobs where you can have a huge impact and be part of that movie magic that don't get enough love. Like, for instance, just recently, the composer on Harley Quinn, the animated series, DM'd me, and I retweeted that. And he said, you're the only one who mentioned the intros to the show over the opening credits. He would do the music, and it was just beautifully set the tone. I was like, this is really well done. And so, I got his soundtracks that were released. That's why he was DMing me. They're available now, and they're very good. And look what he's able to do. I'm so glad we're learning more about composers and costume designers and makeup teams. I just think that's fabulous.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today, actually. The concept that there are like all of these little mini armies of people that have to, work together to create one of these massive endeavors, especially when we're talking blockbuster movies and stuff. It's not just the sort of director and his cabal of actors. He has to rely on production designers and concept artists and, and then we're getting into the visual effects world as well. It's massive, and there are a million ways in. You're absolutely correct.
Well, I also think something else people have to learn is I think that there is this idea when people first approach it, the director knows all. Yeah. The director says, I know exactly what I want, and I'll tell you exactly what to do. Everyone who works on this set is just an extension of me. Right. And that's not true. I think a really good leader says, hey, and recognizes and says, hey, you're a professional. Well, give me some options. What do you recommend? This is what I'm thinking, but I think people need to and that's why I think people sometimes feel they don't want those other jobs, because they're like, I'm just doing the bidding of the director. And it's like, no, you are a full contributor. It's like movies are a team business, which I think is one of the reasons they have mass appeal. When just one person is making a painting, it's very specific in its style and maybe, how it, that person just does what they personally want to do. When you have a movie, you literally have a bunch of people sitting around going, well, I like this. Well, okay, well, I prefer this. Well, what if we did this? And then everyone goes, oh, okay, we all like that. And that reflects, I think, the audience.
Do you think that when there is a director that is so totalitarian like that and so, strict about having the decision? They do. Does that hurt the eventual box office of a movie when they're that hardcore, or can that sometimes help, or is it a bit of both?
I love the way you threw a curveball in there, because I think that at the box office, it might not necessarily hurt it. Yeah. If you have, if a director really has that strong fan base, I'm not saying it's going to be $1 billion picture, but if they have a small budget and they just do what they want, well then yes. you know, they could probably still have this, enjoy a level of success that they're happy with. But they're never going to level up. Hollywood is a business. I'm sure you know this as well. I'm sure many businesses are this way. It's who you know.
Yes.
So if nobody likes working with you, you're never going to level up from making your own small little movies.
100%.
You know?
That's why the older actors that we see that are constantly working, they're generally pretty cool people because people want to keep working with them, right?
One of my favorite Brad Pitt stories is he said the first thing he does is befriend the cinematographer to make sure he looks good.
Of course.
Hey,
well, it's been working for him. He's got that down.
Like, put a good filter on me.
So you've come from a background of working with teams and working with companies and stuff, but then you've also pivoted and completely done everything. I imagine you do almost everything that you do these days fully independently on your own, correct?
I do.
Yes. And how has that transition been for you? And what fires you up? What gets you going? Why? You know, and what's interesting is we were discussing about having you on over Twitter DMs. And about a month and a half ago, you're like, I don't know if there's going to be anything to talk about. There's,
it was a weird section, for like a couple of weeks. It was like there's like nothing happening.
But Grace, you have been on fire. You're posting videos every two. You like honestly really good stuff. And I love your movie math series. I love that you dedicated one to Canada. I thought that was fantastic. But you've got new content coming out all the time, and I'm wondering, how do you get that fire every day, you personally, and how are you finding these stories and these ways in to create content in this particular crazy time period?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I'm not only a creator, but I'm also a customer. You know, the saying goes, right? I mean, I really genuinely like what I cover. So oftentimes I will cover just what a question I have. I'm like, oh, well, here's an angle. And then also I'm very fortunate. I love Twitter. I mean, I know Twitter can be a cesspool, and I've dealt with that side of Twitter,
Sure.
and I feel sometimes it can be particularly difficult for women, but you just have to keep going, and I've known a number of people in my space who've just outright quit Twitter, but I think it's just wonderful. I love interacting with people every day. I get requests of stuff to cover, which really helps me understand what people are interested in. I get, tips on stories. I'll see them, but there's a couple of times where I see them first from, people in the BTT community who are like, hey, look at this. And I'm like, oh boy, I'll get right on it. I've been fortunate that I cover a lot of different assets. I'm not just a movie reviewer. I also cover news, as you stated, the box office.
Yeah.
So there's always some stuff. It was a little dicey there. I'd say there's maybe a 2-week period where I was like, uh-oh. But, there's always, thankfully, stuff to cover. And also, I have to say, streaming services, just like they've been a godsend entertainment-wise, for people like me, they've been a godsend in stuff to cover.
Yeah, and you...
God bless Netflix.
Totally. And you seem to be much more focused on what's coming out. I've noticed a lot of movie reviewers that have been freaking out because there has been like this big gap of new big movies to talk about.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have gone back into their archives and their libraries and they've re-reviewed some classics, which I think is fun content. But you chose, I think, specifically to stay on what's coming up and what's new. And you've started to review new things. I saw you weren't a big fan of Unhinged.
I was not. I felt that was controversial,
Yes.
But I think I have to say, my North Star is just my honest opinion.
Of course.
And so I feel like, if that's the only way I can really do this. And then I have the confidence to do it because I say what I believe and feel very strongly about. Also, one other thing people don't seem to get is that you can change your opinion. People are like, oh, you said this. And you're like, oh, but I didn't see this. This has been introduced and this was revealed.
100%.
I think that's another good thing in life, along with evolve or die. You should never be set in stone.
Yeah. And I think
it's really important to stay liquid.
Totally. And there's a tremendous value in reevaluating things and going back, like I know that people are huge fans. I think you love Batman versus Superman and, I like
love it.
Greg Miller, who works at Kind of Funny, loves it. And there's a lot of people that I respect and I look at their work and they have massive, they just love that film. And that movie did not work for me, but because there is so much Yeah, it was, but I love Man of Steel, and it was weird that I just did not dig Snyder's take on. It was mostly the Batman take. I just didn't like that he was using guns and that he wasn't using his detective abilities. He seemed to be getting outwitted quite a bit in that film. Like Wonder Woman was giving him information, and other people had info that he didn't have. And I'm like, this is the smartest human on earth. Anyways, I'm not going to re-review that right now.
No, but because I mean, like, no, I think that's another thing. I think that a lot of people get caught up in the hate. You know, and while I have strong opinions, I certainly don't begrudge anyone else's strong opinion.
Totally.
That's how we have the best conversations.
And also when you see people that you generally like the way they express themselves, and they are able to lucidly give you an idea of why they came to that opinion, it does make you kind of think, okay, maybe I need to give that film another try, or that game another try. And that's one that is definitely on my radar. And also, because obviously the Snyder Cut is everywhere, and congrats to you for the exclusive interview that you had with Zack Snyder. You were great, by the way. Yeah, that was, well, you asked him great questions, and that was a great conversation. How did that come together for you? Are you friendly with Zack?
I can't really say how that came together. I think that maybe someday, but that's off the record. But it was I was really honored to be his first interview for that on YouTube. It turned out great. It was my first Zoom interview that I'd ever done. I was scared to death it wasn't going to record.
So it is nerve-wracking.
Like, oh my God. Yeah. I was like, I did a couple tests with friends a couple of days before. I was like, you got to help me test the Zoom thing. Because, all my meetings are over like Google Hangout and stuff like that. So, so that was great. And I was just so proud of it. And I'm really happy with how well it's done. It's actually the most watched interview with him on YouTube already.
Well, it's wonderful, as it should be. And you asked pertinent questions.
He was very nice.
He was cool. And I've never met him, but he works in Vancouver, which is where I'm based all the time. He made Watchmen here. He made Man of Steel here. I actually was on the set of Man of Steel because I had a mutual friend that works. And it was really cool. And the word about him is that he's just an amazing collaborator and a fantastic guy and a great team builder. And I want great success for him. And I want to love all of his movies. I haven't loved all of his movies. But I am so hopeful that his take on Justice League just bowls me over and knocks me out. And I'm really happy for him that he got a chance to see it through.
Well, he has incredible heart. I think he has a very distinct style, but as we were just discussing, he's someone who does value the people on his team and their input and what they have to say. And I think that's why he has such loyalty from not just his team, but his fans. And that's why he got the Snyder Cut.
Yeah, well, this is a very interesting time. I know that one of your other passions alongside movies is comic books. And I think I saw in one of your interviews about you that you kind of made a specific choice to kind of focus more on movies than comics and keep your focus in that direction. And tell us why.
Well, I used to cover both. I've written comics. I've written for Marvel. I've written for DC. I had my own comic book that I did called Superbia for Boom Studios. It ran 16 issues total. So I know that world very well. But it's a business. And, I feel one of the things about my coverage that's unique is that it's so business oriented. And so I got to a point covering comic books where I was like, I don't know the business of comics as well as I know the business of movies. To cover it at the same capacity. Also, from a consumer perspective, I feel like the quality of comics has dipped substantially.
Right.
Like they're not nearly as good as they used to be. I still read comics every Wednesday. Well, now Tuesday and Wednesday, because for some reason DC releases their comics on Tuesday. I'm an avid comic book reader. I absolutely adore them. I love the medium, but I don't read as many comics as I used to. And it was getting to a point where I think if you're going to cover something, you really got to know the space.
You got to be in there,
right. There were just too many comic books where I was like, I don't want to read it. Yeah. And then, how can I cover something where I haven't seen what's happened in this latest issue?
Right. Yeah, and
that's you got to really know what's going on.
That's something that I grapple with because I've been covering movies and TV shows and mostly video games. Video games has always been my heart and soul. But you want to try to get to everything. And it's impossible just with time constraints. And one thing I admire about you is that you seem to be able to watch everything that comes out, which is incredible. But that's your job, so that's awesome. But I also feel like it's important to know other verticals and other things that are happening, and to for your own mental health as well and well-being, is to like ingest. That's
true. I keep an eye
different
on
content.
I do keep an eye on comics. I've become much more interested because I started covering Injustice 2. And then I covered Injustice 2, and then Mortal Kombat, some of the movie characters that are in there, I cover those.
Yes, sure.
So I've started, and also because, video games are starting to have TV shows based on them. I mean, they haven't really, and movies. So I've started to learn about the world of video games. So I'm starting to feel pretty comfortable in that space too, which is interesting. I mean, I spend so much time on the internet. Whenever I get my weekly screen report from Apple, it's like a little depressing. I'm like, how much time did I spend on the computer on my phone today? And they're like, oh, it's true, Grace. I'm not going to tell you the number because this is embarrassing. But I'm just consumed, So like when I'm not making videos, I'm a big fan of Robin Williams, and I feel that Ryan Reynolds and Jim Carrey have kind of come from the same school of having an incredible reference point. And I think that's not only important from comedic perspectives, but also from a news perspective. I think you need to know everything. So I try to just read and observe as much as I can, so that when something does happen, I'm like, oh yeah, and I can connect all the different things that pertain to that story. So you asked about my work day and my work ethic. I would say I take Saturdays off. I try to, but I would say that almost every day, except for maybe 2 to 3 hours a day, I'm doing stuff that pertains to my job. I think a lot of people are that way these days.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, when I'm not making video content, I'm playing the stuff that I got to talk about, but it is more than a job. It's I think that there's a passion and a fire that drives both of us, but I think it's also an acknowledgement of this opportunity that we both have, and a kind of reflection of trying to take it seriously. Like there's a responsibility here to know your stuff, and to really deliver. And that's what's impressed me about your work, Grace. I mean, honestly,
so sweet of you.
You don't, your opinions don't always fully align with mine, and I think that's fantastic. But
you
have, but you have, a reason for every thing that you're stating, and for every piece of information that you're sharing, and it's a researched reason, which I see that, I know that, and I respect that very much.
Thank you, Victor. I feel like you gotta back it up.
You do. You got to back it up. So let's talk about DC FanDome, because I know that.
Wow, what a day.
Yeah, it was amazing, right? Like they really knocked it out of the park. I was blown away. I watched the whole damn thing too. I couldn't leave my computer.
Well, I couldn't watch all of it. I was covering most of it. From a fan perspective, it was beautiful. From a work perspective, it was a nightmare.
I know. I mean, I didn't know what to expect, and they had all the layoffs at DC before this thing, and I was like, what terrible timing. This is so brutal that this is the news cycle leading into FanDome, and FanDome is, it's nebulous. Nobody's done one of these before. We didn't know what to expect, but they really pulled it off. At
Comic-Con, you have a break between panels, where like there's 2 panels for a day, and then, the next day there's more panels. But they were like, oh no, they're back to back to back to back. And you're like, what? I got to cover what just happened in this panel. So like that was crazy. I don't know. I think the blitz, the shock and awe aspect worked really well for them. And I still managed to cover it. I think things worked out. I was very happy with the response to my coverage. And I had a lot of fun doing it. So while I would prefer there to be breaks, I would certainly be happy to do it the same way again. I hope next year. I don't know if they can sustain it every year like that.
I think they've laid out a model, though. I mean, I would love to see an equivalent thing from Disney or from Marvel. Like there is, there's so much content that's made through these different verticals in so many directions that it almost makes sense to celebrate your work like that. Video game companies have been doing that. They've been not just with E3.
Will it kill the live event?
Right.
I mean, a live event is very expensive, which
Yes,
is one of the
exactly.
reasons I think that Comic-Con is, has done so well for so long, is that everyone's like, you deal with the headache of putting that together and I'll just show up. Only Disney has Star Wars Celebration and D23, which is every other year.
Yeah.
But, Warner Brothers, I mean, look at this. They did everything digitally. They had a couple people in a green screen room, and they got they got as much or if not more coverage by having their own day than they would have if they'd gone to Comic-Con.
And
they could do it all in advance.
Yeah, that was all smart. Did you see this was going to be successful? Did you know that it was coming into it, or were you
sure, to be honest with you?
Yeah.
I knew it would do well with DC fans, but everybody's so concerned about the pandemic right now. People are a little checked out from the entertainment space.
Yeah.
Interest is just a little bit lower than it usually is. I have to
Well, there's a lot of things to focus on in the world.
There
many
certainly
things.
are.
Yes.
Yes, But I think that they did such a good job with, again, the shock and awe.
Yeah.
That people showed up. I think it was smart that they split it into 2 days. They were gonna have like competing rooms.
Yeah.
People were like, I'm just gonna spend all day in Hall of Heroes, so sorry. So I think they were smart to split it and just focus on all these big announcements, and it was great.
I think DC was watching your videos where you were talking about how the hell am I going to cover all this stuff, and I think that's some very shrewd decisions made there. What was the big success in terms of review? What's making you the most excited, and what do you think is going to be huge business for DC coming out of FanDome? Yeah, it was ridiculous.
The Batman, I was shocked. It did Joker well. I mean, out of the gate, it did incredibly well. I think it was wonderful that Matt Reeves showed up with something. I think everybody at DC FanDome recognized the importance of having something to show, which was great.
Yeah.
And I think that blew everybody away. And they positioned it to do that. It was the last panel of the day. And, I was really impressed.
It wasn't just the great rendering of Batman, and I think Pattinson's going to fill that suit quite well and that character quite well, but it was the world building, and it was on the shoulders of giants because we'd seen something similar with the Nolan stuff.
Yes.
But there was a gritty, palpable, like you could feel that world, and it was so well sort of illustrated for us. It was wonderful.
Well, it is like Nolan's Batman. It is like Phillips's Joker, and it's very Fincher, to the point where I was like, Fincher should have taken that movie when they offered it to him.
Totally.
He'd been wanting him to do DC for a while, and look what happened. They just got someone else to do a Fincher movie for them. But I think that I think the beatdown that he does when the guy says, "Who are you supposed to be?" That's what sold the trailer.
Yeah. We needed a moment like that,
really
right?
well.
Because we know that we're going to get a cerebral character. We know we're going to get a detective. We know there's going to be, beautiful cinematography and great pacing, but we also need to see the eruption of anger that is latent in this character, and that was there. It was cool.
Well, exactly. And also, we've never seen that element of Batman in a movie, really, I don't think.
Right. Yeah.
With that anger. And I think it taps into a visceral anger that the whole world's feeling right now.
Sure, yes.
So people are like, I know how Batman feels. I'd like to do that,
What did you... I know that you're back and forth around Ezra Miller and, he as a bankable actor and he as our new Flash. How did you feel they handled the discussion of this Flash film?
I think they're creating a Flash film that is a must-see.
Yeah.
By giving you a lot. I mean, Ezra Miller is, I think, not the star of his own movie. You know?
Yeah.
I think it's, Warner Brothers has tremendous loyalty to their people. It's always been a studio that is that way.
It's worked out for them.
Yes. And there are people that, like Amber Heard and Ezra Miller that people, and I think it's difficult for any studio because they're big question marks. And I think, I think Ezra Miller has less support than Amber Heard. It's a difficult situation for them. And I think that Amber Heard, interestingly, was very good in her role as Mira. I think that from a purely from a creative standpoint, I think it would be unfortunate to see her go because of that. Mm-hmm. With, not even, of course, not even the Pandora's box that are her legal problems with Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
But I think that the situation with Ezra Miller is that I think he's just not actually delivering in the films that he's in. I think it would be more complicated, like the Amber Heard situation, if you were like, oh, but he does such a great job.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately in both Fantastic Beasts and The Flash, you're like, I don't see it.
Yeah. He's a big personality when you see images of him and red carpet and stuff, but I don't see that on screen in the stuff that I've seen him in. Whether it's the script he's been given or the performance beats that he's hitting, I just don't see this guy who's kind of being marketed as the Ryan Reynolds of the DCU now, right? Like he's got that, he's supposed to have the sass and the comedy but I just don't see that.
Interesting comparison. He's more turning into Jared Leto, who has also had a problem delivering.
Yes. You know,
you can't, if you want to be like really artistic and out there, that's fine. People really respect that. But you got to deliver, you have to deliver artistically.
Yeah.
And I think both those guys are not delivering when they show up. I mean, Jared Leto, we have to give him the benefit of the doubt because of all the edits that were done to Suicide Squad. So I think that's not totally fair. But I think, and I want to be clear, Ezra Miller at the beginning of his career was incredibly talented. He delivered, and we have to talk about Kevin. He delivered in Perks of Being a Wallflower. I don't know what's going on with him, but he's not delivering right now.
Well, he's in these ensembles too, right? Where there's just so much trust and so many different pieces. And I mean, like the Justice League story is unbelievable. You know, all of the
I liked that clip they first showed when he and Bruce interact, you know, and he's like, that's not totally true. And he catches the Batarang. I thought he did a nice job there. Yeah. As I said earlier talking to you, I'm happy to change my mind. Change my mind, Ezra Miller. I'll never close the door on somebody unless they do something truly egregious.
Yes.
You know, like, it's like, all right, and I think the whole world is that way. I think that's why I think redemption is not only a popular thing in entertainment, but just in life.
Totally.
You know,
we all just want to know we're all human.
People love to see people turn things around, turn their lives around, turn their careers around. And I think everybody would, you know, be open to that. Unless, I mean, of course, there are some lines you can't cross, but I think that's, you know, rare.
Speaking of which, the rumors of Johnny Depp as the Joker have been percolating for a while. Do you think there's any truth to that? Do you think we're going to see Johnny Depp in the DC universe? No. Warner Brothers has got him in Fantastic Beasts, and that's it, kind of? And
they're suffering for it, you know, even though I think he's doing a very nice job there. I think that's a situation where the script is letting him down.
Right.
I think Johnny Depp as an actor is back. I think he's done the work in his rehab. I think he was great in the Murder on the Orient Express. I thought he was great
me too.
in his Grindelwald appearances. But I think Johnny Depp is still a little bit of a liability. And also he's a totally different age. I think they're doing a much younger version of Batman. I mean, look at the age of everybody. Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano. You know, I think that Johnny Depp, and I just think it's like, I think it's too obvious. I think that I think they're going to want someone who's going to be able to like surprise people just like Robert Pattinson is.
Right. And Heath Ledger did.
Yeah. Like if you're going to bring Jared Leto in, how is that not just exactly what Joaquin Phoenix just did?
Right. Right. Exactly.
I think they want to do something really different.
Do we get a Joker in this Batman movie, do you think?
And I thought I don't think this one. I'm hearing Court of Owls, and you saw an owl on the front of the card in the teaser. Yep. So I think that, you know, Court of Owls is going to be in the upcoming Gotham Knights video game, you know, in your corner of the world. Yeah. So I think that DC is finally leveling up Court of Owls. Court of Owls is going to be big going forward. I never particularly cared for that storyline, but again, I'm excited for them to change my mind. I'm excited to be like, I love this.
You know, and that's the challenge. I loved that storyline, but I have not been able to keep up with every book either. You know, it's you got to pick your battles. You can only play and watch and see and touch so much of this stuff.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, especially with streaming. Streaming has exponentially increased what I need to watch.
Yeah, totally. And you're a big superhero fan, and all of these shows, there's some really great work in all of these superhero shows, but it's out of control. I can't watch all of this stuff.
But you got it.
Yeah.
Good. No, but the thing is that I like to tell people the difference is that when you're just reviewing movies, that's only like 3 hours tops. But I'm increasingly getting to review 10-hour movies.
Yes.
Like sometimes they'll be like, I'm glad that Netflix has started giving critic stuff very early, like a
Right.
month, 2 to 4 weeks early. But sometimes I'll get something and they're like, here you go. And you're like, when am I going to watch 6 hours of television? You know, like it's really hard.
Yeah. What's your favorite out of the superhero world in shows right now? What are you really hooked on?
Oh, I don't know if I could pick a favorite. I think, and they're
There's
all
so
great
many.
in that they go back to back. You know, they don't really compete. You know, we've all finished Umbrella Academy, and it was phenomenal. And I've finished Doom Patrol, which I think is such a great show. I'm glad to see it doing so well on HBO Max. I hope HBO Max can save the DC Universe shows, because DC Universe has really strong content actually, but nobody watches it because it's on DC Universe. Like the Harley Quinn animated series is like Batman the animated series, good. But
I've heard that. I haven't seen it. Yeah, I haven't seen it. No, we don't have that in Canada yet, but they have all kinds.
See, this is
they have
ridiculous.
I know they have distribution deals all over the place, and it's really scattered. And Warner Brothers needs to do a better job around the world, and with the comic books as well. Like I'm a Marvel Unlimited subscriber, so you have those 25,000 plus Marvel comics at your fingertips. And I know that they included something like that in DC Universe. That didn't come to Canada either, and now they're closing that down.
New comics, anyway.
Yeah, I know, but there's, I mean, honestly, there's so much great archival stuff to dig into.
That's
there's
true.
New characters to kind of
do archival though, because
I know.
I'm so busy with the new stuff coming. I will go back and read something if something's coming out and I want to have the reference. Like I just rewatched Seven.
And that's what's happening. Yeah, and that's what's happening is but the new superhero movies like James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, they're digging into the back catalog like crazy, and you want to have some kind of point of reference. So I didn't know anything about Captain Marvel.
Sometimes I think they can dig too deeply.
Yes,
you know, where they're like, particularly, I'm glad you mentioned The Suicide Squad. Now, I think the movie could be a lot of fun, but there's some characters there where I'm like, I think that for like hardcore comic book fans, they're like, oh my God, not like Peacemaker. Who would ever think he'd be in a movie? And I think mainstream audiences go, that's a stupid hat. You know, they're not like, oh, wow. You know, I think that
I would agree with you.
That's careful.
I would agree with you, but I would counter with who the hell thought that Guardians of the Galaxy would become such a massive experience.
True.
And when I saw that,
I
was like, I don't know there's a talking raccoon. How is this a superhero team? And then it ended up being an incredible movie, and the sequel's terrific too.
Well, I hear that the Suicide Squad is testing pretty well so far with the people that are showing it. I think he's only showing it to his close circle, but they like it.
Yeah.
You know, it's really tough. You know, people always now will say, well, we didn't think we'd like Heath Ledger, and we didn't think we'd like Suicide. I mean, we didn't think we'd like Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's 100% true. But it's not always going to be the case.
No.
I think there are a lot of executives in Hollywood who don't sample their own product. So I think they're like, I don't know. You know, so I think that's why they put so much faith. I think that's why you have some creators who have so much power right now. They're like, well, that guy knows. So just let him keep doing it. And you're like, but no, you have to know too. Like, I think that Marvel benefits from the fact that Kevin Feige loves these comics himself. So he can be like, I personally know if it's good or not.
Yeah. And DC has struggled to find that individual, haven't they?
They tried to have it be Jeff Johns, but he just pushed his own comics. So it didn't work out.
And now, now
Jim Lee. Adapt my back catalog.
Yeah. Well, now Jim Lee is there. Do you have faith in?
He's doing a great job.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
But Jim Lee, you know, he launched Image.
Yeah.
You know, Jim Lee has experience as a businessman, and he understands the bigger picture. You know, Jeff Johns had tunnel vision about wanting to adapt his stories, get his ideas up there. You know, he was solely a creative before he became a producer. So he did a total 180. So he was like, oh, great. Now I can be a creator of other people's work. You know, he doesn't know what it's like to be a curator and to be a guide, someone who guides the content and guides other creators, which is just as important. But Jim Lee, I believe, understands that. And from what I've heard from my sources in DC and Warner Brothers likes Jim Lee. Jim Lee is someone who gets along with people, and people are happy to talk to him and to see what he thinks and get his input.
I mean, his name was obviously all over the place when the DC layoffs were happening, and everybody was wondering what the heck is going to happen with Jim Lee. DC FanDome was basically, you know, Jim Lee rising to the forefront and his star power. He was in almost every panel. He was all throughout the whole day. It was unbelievable.
He's the only face that DC has right now. You know, they don't have any other stars anymore. I don't know if they want to either.
Walter Hamada gave him. Yes. Yeah. Well, Walter Hamada I think Jim's our guy. I think they're pointing at Jim as Kevin Feige. I think they're saying we need this.
Oh no,
leader. No.
I don't think that'll ever happen.
No.
Jim Lee is an advisor.
Okay.
And Walter Hamada runs the movies. The comic book people will never be involved in the movies.
Do you think they look at Jim as just comic though? I mean, yes. Hamada said, we have this guy here that knows all of these characters and we talk to him about everything, about TV shows, about movies.
I 100% think they run everything by Jim Lee.
Okay.
100%.
But they're not going to give him
Jim Lee make movie decisions? No.
That's not going to happen. Okay.
No, that's Walter Hamada. Very, very territorial.
And do you think he's got the awareness of the world of DC with the same kind of pedigree that Feige does? Does he have as much affinity for it?
Let's see how this multiverse thing works out.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see how it works having none of these movies connected, really. But
Yes.
I have to say, DC FanDome was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
All those movies look good. All those TV shows look good. So I think Walter Hamada, and he comes from the horror division, which was really good.
Right.
Warner Brothers. So I think he really knows what he's doing.
And the multiverse is, and honestly, Marvel's going to have their own multiverse pretty soon here, and they're going to have to reconcile Spider-Verse growing, out of their own world as well. So it's very comics oriented, and it does serve a tremendous amount of purpose. And we're all familiar with it as comic readers going way back. So I think it's maybe not the threaded MCU kind of vibe that Marvel's been able to enjoy the success of, but I think that they might actually knock it out of the park here with this multiverse, and they might have a whole bunch of different, ways for people out there. Yeah,
I think they really might. I think that if they tell movies and stories that are just so compelling, people will be like, "Oh, I'd love another Batman story." I think they have a lot of Batman.
I know they do.
They can get through this, and mainstream audiences like every Batman. And they're like, okay, I will see 4 Batmen pretty much around the same time. That's going to be amazing. That's the only thing. But the reason, going back to what you were saying, it's from someone from your corner of the world is going to come and run DC Comics in general, all of DC, someone from video games, someone from esports. Right. That's the hire they're looking for. So I'm very curious. That person will become the face of DC. I'm very curious.
Clearly, comics need to pivot to digital in a more substantial way than they already are, and they need to reach people that way. And maybe the way that comics are produced will be injected with some interactive elements or some pieces of voice work or some animation stuff that kind of makes them leap off the page a little bit more, because that's what digital provides.
That's pretty interesting. I like that idea.
But they're so important to the future of all of these properties. Like, what I don't want to see happen with either Marvel or DC is that Marvels just get or that comics just get sort of pushed down into the basement, and they only dig into the catalog. They only go to the past successes. Yes. I think they need to constantly reinvent themselves, and it's basically what they're getting is concept art and storyboards and plot devices that could be fantastic for movie audiences, on a constant basis.
Because I think video games are starting to do that work instead for the
that too.
TV companies.
Yeah.
Because
for sure.
It's visual and it moves, it's closer.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, you do it first, and then we'll take our cues from this.
Yes.
I think that comic books, I've been worried about this for a while. Alan Moore, one of the most famous comic book writers, obviously, of all time, made a really good statement about how it's difficult to write for different mediums. Comic book writers and TV writers and movie writers are all different people. It's all different skill sets. And I think that comic books are really unique, and they share more with literature, good literature, than movies and TV do.
Right.
And so I would hate to lose that. But comics that are being produced right now aren't of that quality.
No.
Like, what's the storyline over the past couple of years? I mean, like, I guess Court of Owls, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But, you know, like, that's the level of, like, X-Men Days of Future Past, right? Or The Dark Knight Returns. Like, where are those level stories? They're just not making them.
I love the Hulk books, and that it just surprises the heck out of me, because the Hulk is seems like a pretty surface character. You know, he's just a monster but they always dig into the psychology of the character. I've been reading, I think, he's an amazing character. I think it's Savage Hulk. I don't even know what the name of it is. It's on Marvel Unlimited right now, but I've been reading it. And I'm like, God, this is fantastic. He goes into hell, and it's basically an unkillable creature, and you know, fascinating villains. And I loved Planet Hulk, which has been made into an animated. Yeah. That would be an amazing film, but of course the film rights are all over the damn place. And it was kind of used in Thor.
Elements, for Thor Ragnarok, because of the problem there. Well, hopefully the She-Hulk Disney Plus series maybe solves that. I hear all the Hulks are going to be in that.
Oh, that's great.
So it's going to be a Hulkamania. So it'll be great. But I mean, like, I agree with you.
I don't know, what has surprised me actually is the Injustice books, the comics. I think Tom Taylor wrote those.
Very good.
I couldn't believe how good those comics were, and of course they played off of the evil Superman thing, and they had to tie in with the video game. But I was obsessed with the books. I read one or two of the collected graphic novels, and I went, "Oh my God, I have to get them all!" And I couldn't stop reading them
now. And it's great. I want to be clear. I think there are some really talented writers working in the business, but they're far and few between. Like Kelly Thompson, I think, is talented. Chip Zdarsky, Matthew Rosenberg is very good. Jonathan Hickman, I think what he's doing with X-Men is fascinating. Would Marvel ever go that far? I don't know. Right.
I love Jeff Lemire, and I love Matt Fraction. I don't know how much those guys are working right now, but
I don't think they're. I mean, I don't like. I think I have mixed. I liked Matt Fraction's Hawkeye, and that's going to be the basis for the Disney Plus show, which I think is going to be really strong.
See, that's and that's what's important with books, right? The comics need to be supported, because you don't know. A lot of it might not bubble up, but every once in a while, like how much of Extremis ended up in the Iron Man stuff, and like it's important that these things, because it's a lot less expensive for these guys to experiment in that medium and to come up with different takes and different ways to kind of progress these characters. Exactly.
Like if Hollywood had created that character, he'd be Token.
Right.
But he was created in the world of comic books, and he's organic and fabulous and just a beloved character. And now he's like taking off like a rocket in video games as well.
This is his year.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, and I can't wait for Spider-Verse 2, and I love this character. Yes. Yeah, I think it's a different world that way. Comics aren't your only love, though. You love movies and, fiction and narrative work in a lot of different directions. Can you give us some other examples of things that you've watched recently, or you're very excited about coming up soon, that maybe have nothing to do? Okay.
Nothing to do with that kind of stuff? Oh, that's funny. I don't know. Yes, I'm going to put a review up. It'll be up by the time this goes up, for Ridley Scott's Raised by Wolves on HBO Max.
How is it?
That is a show that really surprised me. It's excellent.
It's a
very, very good show. And it builds on Ridley Scott's Android verse.
Awesome. So is it in,
really cool.
Is it in the verse?
Actual reference to it yet, but as you'll see in my review, the androids there bleed white goo. And that to me is Ridley Scott's androids. I'm like,
unbelievable.
Like they could bleed anything, but white goo? Come on.
That's awesome.
I wish he did more with that, actually, because I think that's really fascinating what he does with androids.
That's awesome. Was this, what you do with Beyond the Trailer, was this kind of what you were hoping you would be doing at this point in your life? Is this something that you've wanted to kind of, like when you saw yourself as a younger creator, as somebody that was, I know this is a tough question, but this is a YouTube universe that I'm existing in and you're existing in. There's so many of us out there building content out there, and there's a pull there, but are you able to have the freedom and the fun that you were hoping for with what you get to do with Beyond the Trailer?
Well, the whole reason I started the channel was that I felt that there was a certain perspective in entertainment news, a certain type of coverage that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll do it. You know, I'll provide it. Like when I first wanted to do a box office report, people were like, oh, moviegoers don't care about box office. And I was like, I don't think that's true. And, you know, grateful that people like movie math so much. So I continue. I think my North Star has been being honest just to how I feel and creating the kind of content that I would want to watch. And I love the interactiveness of the internet, you know, I just think it's fabulous. It's a great place to be working.
I feel the same way. And it is amazing that we can be empowered, you know, virtually on our own. And we have a platform like this and we can put content out there, and then you see the back and forth and people mostly, I mean, there is some negative stuff to this always on and always connect. But it is pretty cool.
So nice.
But it is cool that you know, people do respect the effort and the work that has gone into it, and it's you being able to provide your voice out there like this, right? There is I don't know, I have tremendous gratitude for that as well. And I came from years of television and it was very different then, but there is something quite wonderful now.
I'll tell you a story. There was a point where I was, you know, trying to make, you know, I was talking about making content, you know, like a partnership. I was like, okay. And I was pitching a video to make for a trade. Okay. Yeah. And it was, I wanted to do about Colin Farrell. And so I was like, I'd like to show the ups and downs of Colin Farrell's career.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we don't really want to have anything negative about Colin Farrell. And I said, well, here's the thing. Colin Farrell knows he's had ups and downs in his career. Yeah. And it ends on a positive note because he's currently on it up. And they were like, no, we don't want to do it. Yeah. We just don't want to potentially upset Colin Farrell. And so I think that's a problem in the entertainment news industry.
Right. Yeah, because I
can say anything I want about Colin Farrell.
And it, you know, it pulls out all of the editorial objectivity, and it pulls out the sort of the real weight of being able to provide opinion, right? And that's something that I've always said too.
Is it the same way in the game industry?
Well, not so much.
Be nicer to them?
No, and I think because it's not really a star system in games, you know, certainly there are some developers and creators out there that have more prominence. But generally, there is an anonymity to how this work gets put out there. And if anything, I would say that people forget that humans make video games, and sometimes they can be more nasty in their criticism or what they've got to say about this stuff than they need to be. But I'm a critic. I can't critique other critics. You know, that's the thing. Like,
oh yeah, I don't know why some people feel they can. I think it's really unprofessional. Stay in your own lane.
Yeah, honestly, we all have opinions, and we have the gift of being professional opinion givers.
Yeah.
But yeah, there has to be this acknowledgement that everybody has a right to those opinions as well, even if they don't jibe with yours and don't align with yours. But in video games, generally people, all bets are off. It's a medium that's still kind of defining itself. It doesn't have the sort of, you know, the good and bad maturation of the Hollywood media machine, which I think can be its own worst enemy sometimes, because people want humanity. They want real, especially now.
Well, I really hope that the video game industry pays attention to what happened to the comic book industry.
Yeah.
Because comic books were like, oh, please let us in, Hollywood. And Hollywood finally was like, okay. And then Hollywood was like, why are you in control? I think that's honestly what Hollywood said. They were like, there's a lot of money here. Yoink.
Yeah.
And so video games make so much more money, though, that I think that they can maintain some more autonomy.
They do, and it's certainly a massive business, but it's not the same cultural sort of prominence that movies and television still enjoys. They don't reach as many people. They make more money based on less people engaging with that thing, you know, whether it's through microtransactions or spending $60 on a game. So the audience pool is massive in totality, but it's much more fractured, and it's So it's not mass market like the movie business is.
I don't know. Disney Plus is getting into microtransactions.
Yeah, they are, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. So video.
How do you feel about that?
I think that it's really smart. I gotta say. I think that it's a hurdle that you have to be subscribed to continue to own it. I think that's problematic. But I think that for them, Disney to circumvent iTunes and Amazon and sell their movies themselves, because it's true. I mean, it'll eventually come to Disney Plus and it'll be sitting on your computer. You know, I'm really curious to see how it works out. I think it's a bold move, and I always respect bold moves.
These are extraordinary times, right? Like Hollywood is reinventing itself right now. And I think that there are a lot of eyes on the way that the video game industry is. And I saw it in one of your videos, actually, the proposition of Disney buying EA or sort of acquiring a video game studio because people are going to be playing games.
Disney actually does not have a games division anymore. And they dismantled their LucasArts one, Lucasfilm. But they're happy to just outsource it. But I feel like games are so big, and I think you're getting to a point where every major franchise needs a game.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the boxes that needs to be checked for a franchise. Like Marvel, I don't think has the games that it should compared to DC.
I fully agree with you. And I feel like the mind share of things like MCU and the DC Multiverse, like that, this is, what people are talking about out there. And this is what people are passively being entertained by. And there's just so much marketing muscle behind all of these different properties,
Yeah.
And if the interactive medium can't, and honestly, we're getting into a real horse race on discoverability right now and people's limited amounts of time and trying to figure out what they're going to be entertained by. And I feel like everybody is being propositioned in a million different directions that some kind of creative, sort of singular focus on being able to see something here and then play something in that universe just makes a lot of sense. But the quality has to remain consistent. And that's where Hollywood and video games have struggled. And the reason why, Hollywood hasn't sort of steamrolled over the video game industries because they're really, really freaking hard to make. There's a language in movie making where everybody knows it and everybody can kind of come and say, well, this grip will do this and this electric will do this and that cinematographer
someone needs to animate the hair and you're like, what?
Yes. Yeah, well, they have to rebuild it every time, and every year these worlds have to look better than last year from the ground up. And so just conceptually, it's an incredibly difficult task, and it's only escalating exponentially, as more horsepower becomes available.
The quality of the consoles.
That's right. Yeah, and
like now here's 4K.
Yes. Well, and now we're seeing game engines in movies and television shows like Mandalorian.
Yeah. That was incredible.
Amazing, and so forward looking, and it was visual effects that looked a little different than we'd seen before, but very effective. Like you could tell you're looking at some kind of a CG, but it was so cool looking and so distinct and I don't know, appropriate for that universe that like it's basically the best sell job that they could have done for that tech. Right? Now we're going to see it everywhere, right?
I hope so.
We'll have that behind us soon.
I'm afraid I have to. I'm having such a good time talking to you, but I got to get back. I got to get back to making the donuts.
You got to do it. I get it. Grace, thank you so much for joining us. This is Grace Randolph, everybody. You can follow her work at youtube.com/beyondthetrailer. And do follow her. She's got some fantastic stuff. You're going to learn something in every video you watch. Thank you so much for joining us, Grace. And thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. And until then, play forever.